A worn path, covered in dust and scars, curved toward a set of iron gates that hung as if they had given up years ago. At the top, Oakridge Academy was etched in pale gold, an ornate title clinging to its last shred of pride. Behind this entrance trouble was brewing something bold, something alive. Elias Thorne, a boy with mud on his boots and fire in his belly, was about to get into a fight he hadn't chosen. How does a belligerent outsider shake up a nest of rich kids and stiff collars? Just wait, you'll see. And before we start, which country are you watching this video from? Write in the comments below. There was this old, beat-up road, all dust and ruts, snaking its way toward a pair of iron gates that had seen better days. Above them, Oakridge Academy was scratched out in peeling gold letters. Fancy once, maybe, but now just sad. Inside, past those creaky gates and down hallways of chipped stone that threw back every sound, a kid named Elias Thorne was about to get hit with the worst moment of his life. Elias wasn't one of them, not even close. He came from a little farm way out past the city limits, where the dirt was more familiar than any classroom. Getting into Oakridge? That was a long shot, a wild break his family could hardly believe. But to the stuck-up rich kids who owned that school, he was just some nobody who didn't fit their shiny little world. It all went down in history class that day. Ms. Eleanor Vance, she was this big-deal teacher everyone respected but kind of feared, picked Elias out of the crowd. She had him stand up front, and the lesson was about some fancy old family, how they got big and then fell apart. Ms. Vance looked at him with this smirk, like she already knew how it'd play out. "All right, Elias," she said, her voice cold and crisp, cutting right through. "Tell me what made this family rise up." He fumbled a bit, nervous as hell. They worked their land good, had fields that grew stuff, kept them going. She didn't even let him get it all out. "The land?" she said, like it was the dumbest thing she'd ever heard. "That's what you've got?" "I figured a kid at Oakridge might come up with something a little smarter than that. Maybe you ought to stick to plowing fields, Elias. This isn't the place for boys like you." The room lit up with snickers, all those smug faces laughing at him. Elias felt his cheeks go hot, but he didn't duck his head. "I was just saying what I figured," he mumbled, holding his ground. "What you figure?" she snapped back, her tone turning mean. "Doesn't cut it around here. Get out of my class. And don't come crawling back." He walked out of there, feeling like someone had kicked him square in the chest. The hallway seemed to go on forever as he tried to keep it together, blinking hard so no one would see him break. Oakridge wasn't just some big dream, it was everything his folks had scraped together for, their one chance to see him make it. And now it was gone, just like that, leaving him with nothing but the sound of his own boots on the floor. The next day, something crazy went down in Oakridge's courtyard. Out of nowhere, this huge helicopter roared in from the sky and plopped right down in the middle of the school grounds. Dust kicked up everywhere, and out stepped Elias's granddad, Arthur Thorne, looking like he owned the place. Arthur wasn't just some old guy from the sticks. He was a big shot, one of the richest men in the city, with a farming business so massive it made Oakridge's budget look like pocket change. He marched into the school, boots hitting the ground hard, and made a beeline for Ms. Vance's office. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice so cold it could have frozen the room solid. "What gives you the right to treat my grandson like dirt?" She stumbled over her words, caught off guard. "Mr. Thorne, I was just keeping up the school's standards, that's all." "Standards?" Arthur shot back, a smirk curling his lip like he'd heard a bad joke. "Your idea of standards is crushing a kid's hopes?" "Elias got into this place because he's tough and sharp, not because of people like you who think they run the show." He reached into his coat, pulled out a check, and slapped it down on her desk like it was nothing. "That's twice what this school runs on in a year. You so much as breathe wrong at Elias again, and I'll have this place shut down before you can blink." Ms. Vance stared at the numbers on that check, her jaw practically on the floor. You could see it in her eyes. She knew Arthur Thorne wasn't bluffing. His kind of clout could make even Oakridge bend the knee. "I get it, Mr. Thorne," she finally said, her voice shaky, like she was trying not to trip over herself. "I'll make it right with Elias. I'll apologize." Arthur waved Elias over and pulled him into a big, tight hug. "Elias, my boy," he said, his voice warm and steady, thick with pride. "You've got no idea how proud I am of you. This place, it needs folks like you, honest and willing to put in the work." Elias looked up at his granddad, his eyes shining with thanks. "I appreciate that, Grandpa, but All I really want is for them to respect me, you know? Respect? Arthur said, nodding like he'd been chewing on that word for years. Ain't something they just hand out, Elias. You've got to earn it. And you've damn well earned it already. When Elias walked back into Oak Ridge, it was different this time. His chin was up, his steps sure. Ms. Vance stood in front of the whole class and said she was sorry, looking at him like she actually meant it, like he was somebody worth seeing. The other kids started to shift too, eyeing him in a way that wasn't all sneers and whispers anymore. Elias stuck it out at Oak Ridge after that, and he didn't just get by, he thrived. Ended up one of the best students they'd ever had. Word of what he'd been through bounced around those old stone walls, hitting everyone who'd listen. It sank in deep. Respect doesn't come from money or a big name. It comes from grit, from being real, and Elias had that in spades. Elias coming back to Oak Ridge wasn't just a win for him, it flipped something in the air around that place. The snide whispers that used to dog him turned into hushed nods of respect. Kids who'd once dodged him like he carried the plague started hanging around, wanting a piece of whatever he had. He wasn't just a kid anymore. He was proof you could stand tall on your own terms, that guts and heart could outshine a silver spoon any day. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Some of the old money families, the ones who'd been lording it over Oak Ridge forever, didn't take kindly to Arthur Thorne storming in. To them, it was a cheap stunt. A loudmouth with cash throwing his weight around. You could hear them muttering about old money versus new money, griping that the school was losing its class, going soft. Elias didn't let it faze him. He kept his nose in his books and his mind on what mattered. He was killing it in class, not just with smarts but with this real, grounded way of seeing things. Growing up on the farm had taught him stuff. The way seasons turn, how everything's connected, what it takes to make something grow. Turns out, that kind of know-how worked just as well with schoolwork as it did with dirt. Arthur, meanwhile, wasn't a one-and-done guy. He kept showing up at Oak Ridge, and not just to flash his wallet. He'd sit with the kids, spinning yarns about his own rough road. How he'd clawed his way up, stayed humble, and learned to value every soul he met. He talked about the land like it was alive, something you had to honor, not just milk for profit. One day, he threw out this idea. A community garden on some forgotten patch out back of the school. He pictured it as a spot where everybody, rich kids, poor kids, whoever, could roll up their sleeves, dig into sustainable farming, and maybe build something real together, not just a bunch of plants. People split hard on it. Some thought it was a solid plan, a way to get hands dirty and pick up skills that actually meant something. Others, the stuck-up types, turned their noses up, acting like gardening was beneath them, too low rent for Oak Ridge's precious legacy. Elias, though, he was all in. To him, it was a chance to bring what he knew to the table and stitch his two lives together. He threw himself into it, hacking away at the weeds, turning the soil, dropping those first seeds like they were gold. He didn't order his classmates around, he just asked them to jump in, made it feel like something they could all own, something worth doing. Little by little, that garden came alive. The kids who dragged their feet at first started showing up, pulled in by the quiet beat of planting, watering, pulling up a carrot you'd grown yourself. They got hooked on the feeling, the pride of feeding themselves, the easy chatter while they worked, the way the whole thing started looking damn beautiful. That garden turned into something big at Oak Ridge, more than just a patch of dirt. It was proof of what Arthur and Elias Thorne had dragged kicking and screaming into the place. Walls between kids started coming down out there. You'd see rich brats and regular Joes shoulder to shoulder, swapping dumb jokes and life stories while they yanked weeds or hauled water. Even Ms. Vance, who'd been all pinched up about it at first, couldn't stay away. She'd wander out and watch her students, really watch them and see how they changed. They weren't just sniping at each other anymore. They were listening, getting it. She started figuring out she'd been dead wrong, letting her own stuck-up ideas cloud what she saw in them. Elias wasn't some hick kid to her anymore. He was sharp, solid, the real deal. One afternoon, while the kids were out there pulling up the first decent batch of veggies, Arthur Thorne stepped up to say a few words. He didn't preach, just talk straight. About sticking together, busting your ass, and giving the land its due. Real wealth, he said, voice rough but steady, ain't about your bank account or your last name. It's the people you hold close and the mark you leave behind. Elias stood next to him, chest puffed up with this quiet pride, thankful as hell. He'd carved out a spot at Oak Ridge, not by playing their snotty little game, but by being himself, sticking to what he knew was right. He'd shown those kids a farmer's son could match them brain for brain, guts for guts, and deserve a seat at the table just as much as they did. That garden stuck around, became a kind of legend. It shouted loud and clear that Oak Ridge wasn't just some playground for the posh. It was for everybody. A place where you could plant something real, watch it grow, and let respect and understanding sprout up too. And Elias Thorne? The kid they'd kicked to the curb? He ended up the guy tending that shift, growing more than crops. He was growing a whole new vibe at Oak Ridge, one where nobody got left out. So that's how it all shook out. Elias Thorne, the kid they figured for a nobody, flipped Oak Ridge on its head. He took a beat-up corner of Earth and turned it into something alive, full of real grit and heart, showing everybody you don't need deep pockets or a big-shot name to matter. Kinda makes you think, doesn't it? What about you? Could you see yourself pushing back like he did? Or would you take a different road? Toss your take in the comments below. I'm all ears. And hey, if the story hit you right, swing by my YouTube channel and smack that subscribe button. Got more tales lined up. Stick around for the ride.